Translating the vibe, not just the text, product lessons from the edge of AI. Hi everyone. Today I wanted to talk about a significant shift happening in the language services industry and how we at Video Translator AI are thinking about it from a product design perspective. Let's context it. There is a recent article by Stefan Huyghe titled "Are Short-Term AI Fixes Undermining the Long-Term Relevance of the Language Industry?" It's a good piece. Stefan argues that while many language service providers are embracing AI to speed up translations and streamline workflows, they may be missing the bigger picture. He goes on to introduce the idea of sourceless content creation, where instead of writing something in one language and then translating it into others, you generate content simultaneously in multiple languages and cultural contexts. It's a radical shift from the old source to target model. And it's more than about just speed. It's about redefining the role translators play, the role that language service providers play, and within the content creation process. Now, he ends the piece somewhat ominously in that he states if the industry doesn't evolve fast enough, it risks becoming irrelevant in the new AI-driven ecosystem. I agree with a lot of what he's saying. He's absolutely right. The pressure is real. The tools that language professionals have relied on for decades were built for a different era, one where content was monolithic, static, and largely it went downstream, one-way traffic. However, the idea of sourceless content is compelling. I think it raises a few practical and philosophical questions. First, what does sourceless even mean? At some point, every piece of content still begins with a thought in someone's head, a sentence in one language. Until we all become cyborgs speaking in binary, this is likely to remain true. The second quibble I have is while his vision is powerful, it doesn't really give us a lot of detail on how to actually implement this kind of system. How do you maintain a consistent brand voice across 10 languages? How do you handle regulatory nuance, cultural tone, context, all those things? To me, the answer isn't to throw out the idea of source altogether, but to rethink what we mean by source. It's not just the original words, it's the intent behind them, the emotional weight, the urgency, the context. That's where we're going to be placing our focus. Okay, so within Video Translator, we think of this as vibe translation. It's about translating meaning, yes, but also tone, emergency, and emotion, the vibe of the message. And it isn't a theory, it's something that we're trying to solve in the real world. So let me give you a concrete example. One of our early use cases was an emergency services provider. They needed to send out emergency alerts, so the notifications had to go out fast. We're talking less than 5 minutes from drafting to delivery. And these alerts had to go out in multiple languages. Aside from the time aspect, you can think about a number of other challenges that we had. So often the messages are written by volunteers who work for the emergency services, and they're writing these alerts from the scene, so often under stress, and the language isn't perfect. They're referencing names and places that they understand because they're locals, so the names and places are often colloquial. Timestamps are sometimes unclear. They might say at 11 a.m., 11 p.m. Now, if you're receiving the message 5 minutes after it was drafted, you know that it probably refers to AM if it's the morning. But for an AI, this is a lot harder. And some of the languages they wanted to translate to didn't have great AI support. Right, so that gives you a little bit of the context of the kind of problem we were trying to solve, why the obvious solution was AI, and how we went about it. Our plan was pretty straightforward in some ways. We built a template solution. Now, if you think of an emergency services message, it has two parts. It has several parts, but two that we're interested in anyways. First, it has a description. What is the emergency? Where is the emergency happening? What time is the emergency happening at? And a bunch of qualifying information. The second, based on the qualifying information, is the instruction. What are we suggesting people do given this is the emergency? We built templates, and in a future video, I'll show this to you in the app itself, so it makes a little bit more sense. But what happens is an API call comes in with the original emergency alert in English. We pull out the pieces from it. So we pull out the description and we pull out the instruction. The description goes into what we call primarily AI heavy stuff. So it goes into AIs for translation. Now we do have a solution called fragments, which is pre-translated content. And this is words, phrases, we also have a glossary, of course. And that's how we deal with the description. On the instructions, we templated the entire thing. So every instruction that came in, we had a copy of that, we pre-translated it, put them into the fragments, and then sent the entire batch through. The outcome here is essentially a hybrid of the message. So the message comes in English, and the way we translate it is partially translation AIs, partially large language models with specific prompts, partially pre-filled fragments, which we already knew how they were going to translate, etc. So that's an example of how we think stuff will evolve. Yes, it's still workflow. Yes, it has AI, but it's not completely AI. It's sort of heavily human curated AI-assisted autonomous systems, if that makes sense. This allows the humans to sort of focus on the instructions, make sure those are all correct, and then provide rules, either in terms of custom grammar or in terms of glossary or prompts for an LLM, all of that to go, we can translate this with pretty good quality, very high quality actually, by the end of it. And we still have a turnaround time of 5 minutes. So you get a fast, reliable, scalable system, one that doesn't sacrifice quality just because it's automated. Okay, let me bring this back to the original point. What we're trying to describe here is a product-led response to the problems highlighted by Stefan Huyghe. It's not sourceless, but it's not stuck in the old paradigm either. It's structured, it's smart, it's flexible. Most importantly, it's human-centered, right? We're not getting rid of translators. Translators are taking ownership of the process in aggregate. And obviously, they spend time looking at the quality of this on an ongoing basis. At Video Translator, we think every language is a starting point. We don't have all the answers, and this isn't our solution is the best. There was a lot of learnings here. The first version we did was pretty terrible because it was purely AI, and then we moved to the hybrid model, which worked much, much better. But that's how I'd like you guys to think about it. It's from a product perspective, what tools can I give both the end client, but also the translators to be able to turn a lot of knobs and dials and get a high turnaround, high accuracy outcome. We call this vibe translation. In a future video, we'll look a little bit more practically, show you the tool, show you how this works, and we'll see how it goes. Thanks so much for listening.